protests. Now, several European leaders have pushed back against US President Donald Trump's threat to impose new 10% tariffs on imports from their countries as punishment for opposing his plans to annex Greenland. Scandinavian nations, plus Germany, France, the Netherlands and the UK and Finland are all affected by the punitive tariff hike. The development comes amid protests in Nuuk, Greenland's capital, where several thousand people took to the streets on Saturday. The protesters chanted slogans and sang traditional Inuit songs. Thousands also turned out in the Danish capital, Copenhagen, and several other Danish cities. Greenland is an autonomous territory within Denmark. Now let's get the view from Washington and bring in DW's US correspondent Misha Komadovsky. Misha, first of all, why do you think Trump announced those extra tariffs today?
Well, it underscores how determined President Trump is to press his very own goals. In a post on Truth Social, he says that the United States will impose 10% tariffs on several European countries unless Denmark agrees to what he calls the complete and total purchase of Greenland. He frames this move as a global national security issue, arguing that the US has long subsidized Denmark and the EU through tariff-free trade and security protection. Trump claims that China and Russia are seeking Greenland as well, insists only the US can secure it, and warns tariffs would rise to 25% on June 1st and remain in place until a deal is reached.
Still, why today? I mean, a delegation of US lawmakers, both Republicans and Democrats, are in Copenhagen right now seeking to reassure Denmark and Greenland of their support. Does this mean there's resistance in Congress to Trump's announcement?
Well, here in Washington, 2 points actually stand out. First, Trump says that he doesn't want to have Russia as a neighbor should Moscow get Greenland. But the U.S. already borders Russia across the Bering Strait, or Beringov Proliv in Russian, near Alaska. Second, he says it's a matter of national security worldwide. As we know, Greenland already hosts a major U.S. military base, raising the question of why Washington couldn't just expand its presence there through NATO instead. On top of that, some of his allies stress that Greenland should be acquired through a purchase, not a military takeover here, and taking it by force would all but rule out any chance of President Trump receiving a Nobel Peace Prize next year, something he's widely known to be seeking.
Now, we've heard that several European leaders have already pushed back against this tariff hike. We've also seen people protesting against Trump's threat to annex Greenland. How is all of this perceived in the US? Are people there following the events?
Yes, they do. And frankly, most Americans are focused on domestic issues, and Greenland simply doesn't register as a day-to-day immediate concern. We don't see those huge protests like in Nuuk or Copenhagen, even though it is strategically very important. Another question is how President Trump continues engaging with European leaders after the firm response from President Macron. What we're likely seeing here is leverage, not a rupture. This fits a familiar Trump playbook, if I may, using tariffs and maximalist demands to push allies to the negotiating table. And the real objective here may be concessions on Arctic security rather than an immediate purchase of Greenland. And we saw quite a similar approach with Canada when President Trump floated the idea of it becoming the 51st U.S. state. And Ottawa didn't escalate. It deflected, it delayed, and it kept channels open. And that's likely the European strategy as well. And with Trump heading to Davos, expect tough public rhetoric alongside quieter negotiations behind closed doors.
And of course, we'll keep an eye on that as well. DW's US correspondent Misha Komadovsky there from Washington. Misha, thank you so much. And I'm joined now by journalist Jakob Illeborg, who is in Copenhagen. Jakob, before we talk about today's protests, I know you've been following those. Let's just pick up on that latest news we heard. US President Trump just announcing that he'll impose a 10% import tax on 8 European countries, including Denmark. How do you think that'll go down with Danes?
Not well at all. Of course, it's a further escalation of an already unprecedented security crisis in Denmark. And it could soon spill over to the rest of Europe, as we hear. Earlier today, the former Danish Secretary General of NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, described Mr. Trump's methods as being sort of gangster-like. And I suppose this is sort of another step in that direction. We're yet to really see the response, official response. We have been expecting something like it, but this will test the unity of Europe for sure.
Now, we're not really used to seeing people coming out in droves across Denmark, but obviously this is a very unusual situation. Do you think that the protests we saw today, that this will grow also because things seem to be coming to a head?
Just answering from nuke first, because I've been following the nuke demonstrations as well. I was part of the nuke demonstrations about a year ago now. They were the biggest ever, and they're saying up there that they're even bigger now. The turnout in Denmark today was also bigger than expected. There is a feeling of real anxiety, but also of growing anger in Denmark and in Greenland. And I would not be surprised if this will grow further, the public protest. You know, I think the Danes and the Greenlanders are feeling whatever we can do to make the rest of the world, if you will, support us now that our friends from America don't. The feeling here, as I said, is really one of grave, grave concern.
So what's exactly changed when you said you've already attended protests last year? What is it exactly that is getting under the skin of Danes right now?
I think it's just that this thing drags on forever and ever. New threats, direct threats, threats, you know, military threats, economic threats. You know, we were supposed to be the best friends of America, one of America's closest allies for many, many years, part of America's wars, etc. And I think the feeling is one of real betrayal. The feeling is we don't deserve this, and neither do the people in Greenland. And right now, I think the Danes are turning to their friends in Europe, hoping for unity, hoping for loyalty, and that the rest of Europe will carry this tariff threat if it turns out to be real. But obviously, we don't know yet. And the feeling here is really one of what are we supposed to do, I think.
All right, journalist Jakob Illeborg there in Copenhagen. Jakob, thank you so very much for that.